So I just want to talk for a couple minutes about a really simple idea. As the title slide there says, small things matter. Big things are important and more consequential, but small things matter too. And a lot of times that's really where we operate is just regular people in everyday life, really more in the small things. And maybe we can become discouraged by that, thinking like, well, who am I? What difference can I make? And that sort of thing. I want to just think about a couple of passages that kind of emphasize the importance of even the small things. If we go back to the Old Testament and look at Zechariah chapter 4, I believe this is in the context of rebuilding the temple after the captivity, and they came back to rebuild Jerusalem. And looking at just the beginnings of rebuilding that temple, which at the time was just started and wasn't completed, this comment was made, for who has despised the day of small things, that simply laying the foundation of the temple isn't building the whole temple, but it's a start. And so with small starts, big things can be completed. And maybe sometimes that's all we're doing is laying the foundation for something or building on someone else's foundation. Of course, that's how Paul talks about in the gospel that different people have different roles, someone planted and watered, and God gives the increase and this sort of thing. And we just need to be part of that in whichever way that we can. We can think of another example from Jesus talking about the parable of the mustard seed in Matthew 13, starting in verse 31. It says there, he presented another parable to them, saying the kingdom of heaven. A lot of these parables are, what's the kingdom of heaven like? Well, here's the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field. And this is the smallest of all seeds, but when it is fully grown, it is the largest of the garden plants. It becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and nest in its branches. And of course, we know, really, you can pick any seed. Seeds tend to be pretty small, and then they grow whatever plant, the big size, but he picks the mustard seed because it's a very tiny seed. And whatever mustard plant he's talking about apparently grows into a tree there. And so, of course, he's talking about the church, the kingdom of heaven, that, certain people become Christians and then they share the gospel with others, and then it grows into a great many people serving the Lord. And, any one of us is just one little part of that. We're just one of those people trying to live a godly life and trying to lead others to Christ and that sort of thing. But, we could have faith just like a mustard seed, which doesn't seem like much, but these things can grow. We just kind of need to bloom where we're planted and build from here, so to speak. Another example is from John chapter 6, verse 9. Of course, all four Gospels have an example of the feeding of the 5,000. And so here in John's account, there's, trying to figure out, how are we going to feed all these people, that they've come out in the wilderness to hear Jesus preach, and now they're hungry. It says there in John 6:9, there is a boy, and we might say a small boy, or a little boy, no one consequential, just this boy. There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are these? What are these? This little bit of food, what are these for so many people? And of course we know what went on then. Jesus was able to miraculously have those multiply and be able to feed all those many people. And not that the lesson is that we're going to physically do all of that, miracles like that, but I think part of the lesson is that even with a small amount of things, we can make a difference. Our contributions may seem small, they might not seem that significant, but it does matter. Whether we're, visiting someone, helping someone, or whatever it is that we do. Another example of that, we might think of our last example here, Mark 9:41, where he gives the example of just a cup of water. We even have a song, a cup of cold water in his name given, may someone's heart renew, or something to that effect, right? It says here in Mark 9:41, for whoever gives you a cup of water to drink in my name. So we're doing a kind deed, and we're doing it in the cause of Christ. Because you are of Christ, truly I say to you, he will not lose his reward. And so let's not discount the small things that we can do. And let's not, one danger of that would be to not even do them, right? Because, it's just a cup of cold water. What difference does that make? Well, we need to operate in those small things and do those things, be diligent, helping others. So just sort of a short devotional talk, even to go back to one of the songs that we talked about, that we sang before our class, to jump back to 219 in our hymnal. How sweet, how heavenly was the song we sang. And it's kind of those little things, how we love each other, right? It talks about when each can feel his brother's sigh. We're tuned into each other, and we know when someone's sorrowful, and we can be a part of that. Love is the golden chain that binds our happy souls together. So those are some good sentiments for us to think about, those small things that we should do. But if anyone needs to obey the gospel or get right with God or make any changes in your life, we're going to sing at this time 380. It won't be very long. It's not going to be very long before Christ is going to return. Of course, in the first century, they thought it wasn't going to be very long, and it's been about 2,000 years, but we're 2,000 years closer to whenever it is, and we need to live understanding that it's going to come as a thief, and we're not going to know the day or hour, and it won't be very long. So are we right with God? If we have any changes we need to make in our life, if we can help you, encourage you to help to let us know that, and we'll help you as we stand and sing.